Like if you leave them in the rain, depending on the material, but potentially
Now recording.
they potentially shrink.
Uh, what? So you wore them and they're smaller on your feet now?
No, I left them on the deck, and I think overnight it
Oh,
rained and the
oh
sun.
yeah, yeah. They're fucking ruined. That's what I did to an old pair of my flip flops. Well, my mom used it and beat it to shit because she would always leave it outside on the deck back then, and
Yeah,
then it just turned like brown and yellow. It's like a black Adidas flip flop with the white stripes, and it just turned like brown after it got
and it
left out.
and it curls up.
Yeah, yeah. It just dies.
Yeah, that's where mine seems to be.
Don't leave that shit out. It's not meant to be left out. It's not like outdoor furniture.
Not like outdoor. Yeah, no, it wasn't like outdoor furniture. That was a lesson learned, I guess.
Yeah. All right, let's start this. Welcome to Verbal Laxative. Today is a two-man show. Jason and Hassan have volunteered to go fight on the front lines of COVID. I'm just kidding. They're not doing anything. They're probably just gaming or some shit. Anyways, we have for you me, Sinzin, and we have Brian.
Hello.
Yeah. All right. Let's keep it intimate today.
Well, it seems like in the news, more protests is on the rise.
Yeah, and
I'm just hearing protests every day.
yeah, man. And then I was so happy when you were like oh, we should have a political podcast the next time, and I was like, yes. Oh God, yes. I'm so
Yeah, we could
excited.
talk about that too.
I'm so excited. I'm so hyped to talk about garbage.
Well, I thought it was interesting. Like, we talk about politics a lot, but we don't talk about like what our views are, like whether we're leftist, whether we're conservative.
And we
Um,
yeah,
you know,
we never really flesh out most of the stuff. There's no like there's no appendix when you listen to us. It's just you get whatever bullshit that we give you. We
well, it's
never
kind
really
of the thing I don't like is that, there's these coalitions with leftists and conservative, right? And you see a lot of YouTube videos about people who were once what do you call it, Democrat and now a
yeah,
Republican kind of
they
thing. It's almost
yeah,
like a religion
it is. It's like I
conversion.
converted. He's like I
Hmm.
used to think like this too, but now I've converted to the new religion, and now these are my beliefs, right? And they just go
Yeah.
all in on those things.
Which I'm curious why, like, I don't feel like politic or political view is like religion. It's not like you're giving one belief or another. It's more like you kind of change. I guess.
I would say the caveat to that would be the ones on YouTube. Most of the people that you see,
Hmm.
and listen to them talk about this stuff is good. I would argue that is more of a religious feel to it than it is like an actual political whatever. Like it actually fleshed out political thought, a change to it, and
Yeah.
it's mostly beliefs. Like like oh, I believe, especially Americans ones are stupid. It's like oh, I used to believe in whatever, like uh, pro-choice. Now I'm pro-life, or I used to be pro-life, and now I'm pro-choice. I used to be pro-gun. Now I'm anti-gun. Now I used to be pro-government. Now I'm anti-government. It's always like
Yeah.
I used to be this. My beliefs were something else differently. Now
Yeah.
I have switched. I have converted. I've been baptized at
Yeah.
the church of the other side, and then now this is what I believe in, and they adopt it
I
wholesale.
I wonder if they say that so that people are more likely to listen to them. Like, oh, why did they change their views?
I think if he is changing it that thoroughly, and yeah, I mean, yeah, I can imagine some people are just doing it for the getting more audience that they want. But I think some people are just they don't think about this shit. This is half baked, and then they just they fucking convert, right?
Yeah. And like that's the thing too is even though you're converting, like it's not just because you're say a Democrat or a Republican or a liberal or a conservative. It's not like you have to subscribe to everything that party subscribe to. You can be a liberal but still have conservative values or some conservative values, right?
Well, yeah. Well, we can. You know what? We should get into it. We should actually talk about what the fuck it means to be liberal, what it means to be conservative,
Well,
and then
okay, so
and then
conservative
we
I felt
and then
Hmm.
we'll flesh it out from there. And then, because you know what, honestly, a lot of these
Hmm.
people that tune into this and listen to this all day on the news or their favorite like pundits or commentators or whatever articles they read, is this stuff is thrown around all the time. And
Yeah.
most of the time people may not even have a full picture of what this actually means, but they have to it seems like they feel like they have to choose sides, and they have to basically fill in the blanks themselves on what these things are when they
Like the word conservative is kind of ironic, right? Because you're like the word conservative is like you are for whatever is status quo, right?
yeah.
So like they should never approve any new law, but they should never like want to abolish any old law, right? Because by definition, whatever is in law is the way it has been,
We'll,
kind of thing.
you know what? Well, let's get into this now,
Yeah.
and then this is an episode that I feel like, well, we're recording just cause so we can fill the fucking storage quota for our fucking host, right,
Yeah,
for the
this has
month.
nothing
But
to do with our audience.
yeah, but you know what? You know what? This is a good time to do it because so much shit is happening right now. And then you know what? For the few people that do listen to us, it might be a good little thing to discuss, and then maybe people will, have a better understanding, or maybe they'll have uh, ideas or whatever to argue on, or they can just have something to fucking flame us about and be like, like these fucking idiots. What are they talking about?
Hmm.
But we'll flesh it out. Usually, like historically, the way that this is set up, like left, right, and all this jazz, it's basically it's very much from a European tradition, right? In a lot of European history, you look at like the English, Italians, French, German, and whatever. Um, it's based on class. That is the earliest way that people have split it out, and it can go back to as far as the Roman times, where it was patrician versus plebeian, right? In this case, the patricians were the guys, were the people that were landowners. They had everything. The plebes, the plebs nowadays in internet, how people fucking say on the internet, they're the fucking the underclass, right? Like the majority of people, but the people that have not, right? And then a lot of the terms we use nowadays, it's born from that. So whenever they form some kind of body to try to be a government, even in ancient Rome, the plebeians had their own body and the patricians had their own body, right? They had different responsibilities. They kind of met a consensus through struggle on which group of people will look after what, and which group of people will do whatever, right? And then you see this in like when Parliament, I guess, when these governing bodies, when they I guess when they formed Parliament, or when they formed these political parties, um, they would have a group of people, let's say landowners or people and have not that have everything on one side of the room of the assembly, right? And then you'll have the people that aren't landowners, aren't lords or whatever, aristocratic people on the other side of the assembly, and this will be born about usually through some kind of struggle or revolution, or something like happened, like they just deposed the monarchy, and then when they made this new government, like this is the way they appease everybody so they don't descend to another civil war, or the civil war keeps on continuing. It's a very general, really rushed sort of history, but that's how it came to be, where you have people that, like aristocrats, landowners, haves on the right side of the fucking assembly or whatever, and then you have, guys that the rest of it, the majority, the plebs, the masses, that would be left side, whatnot, right?
So I was reading like, when I was a kid, they were saying like these are your political views, and then you would have description, and then people are like, well, you kind of just decide where you feel aligns with your values.
Yeah, nowadays,
But
yeah,
there's
it's like
but
a chart nowadays. They simplified it. Now it's like a
yeah,
fucking political view for dummies, and it's like, oh, do you check
but
off this box? Then this is a
you belong to that group.
yeah,
But what I'm trying to say is rather than values, And it's almost like how you're describing like the early days with left and right, how they're categorized. It's almost based on class.
It is, and
So like whatever class you're born into, it's almost likely that those are your values. So if you're like a white person who's from a rich family and conservative being a conservative is likely your role because you
it's in your
this is
interest.
your
It's in
fam
your
it's
family's
in your interest.
interests.
Yeah,
It's
your family's interest. And it's also the values your family probably taught you,
yeah,
right? Like to be thankful and thank the Lord, da da da, and be about upholding like you're not being taught like, oh, we're being kept down by the police and we
yeah,
need to reform. You're
yeah,
you're not taught that, so you're likely not going to be a leftist, so you're
yeah,
likely more likely to be conservative.
yeah.
And
Plus, yeah, yeah. The cops usually in these big like they've WASP families, right? Like white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, like the big the affluent class usually they're not gonna be usually troubled by the police, right? Compared to if you're from a poorer neighborhood, you're more likely to have those confrontations with.
yeah, so I'm curious, for you, like how did you kind of chose your political views? Like was it based on your upbringing and like
It is, well, obviously it is, but it's also based on what you learn and experience in life, right? But mine's Um, if you put me in the context of like the Western one right now, it wouldn't make no sense. It would because what I drew my a lot of my views on was studying a lot of like history and a lot of Chinese history. So
Mhm.
like the left right values are not the same in China, and I can argue probably that in a lot of non-Western countries, you have to there's you can't cleanly divide people into the same uh, categories with the same values. Like you can simplify it to left and right in China,
Yeah.
but
Would
the
you would
left
you
would
find it
want
difficult?
the left would want completely different things in the left in America, right? The right would want completely different things in the right
Oh,
in
I see what you're saying.
America,
Yeah.
right?
Because depending on your frame of reference, left and right have
Depends on
different meanings.
yeah, and it depends on their political history and
Yeah.
and yeah, it's so it's different, right? Like it's this has to be it has to come from history because or else it's meaningless. This is how it evolved from it, and then if you take the context of the history outside of it, it becomes into this meaningless like chart where it's like like this is a left value, this is right. It's meaningless. It's literally
I
it's just
agree with
labels.
you. I agree with you. There are labels and they are meaningless,
Yeah.
but I also disagree where it is meaningful to people. Like people fight
Yes.
wars for this, people die for each other, people, like
Yes.
protest
Kind of
because
like
of where you stand.
you're right.
It's
You're
really,
right. It's very meaningful for people. Materially, it means nothing, right? And usually these movements usually fail because they're based on nothing. They're based on something that's it's fucking air. It's smoke in the air. It's nothing based on any kind of material reality. And when you try to force something that's not based on anything, like a struggle or a fight or like a conflict, you're gonna lose because if you're based on nothing and you're trying to hold a struggle, you're not gonna fucking win. And you're not gonna achieve whatever goal you have. And your
so
goal
like,
itself is not even rooted in reality at all, right?
if we were to say based on nothing, you would probably say like the Hong Kong protest was kind of
Yes,
based on nothing.
but
But like, would you say the George Floyd protest was based on something? Because it was like
I
a person's lives. It was about
yes, I think yeah. Well, like obviously there's a fucking big race problem in America, and then you know what? Let me finish this one thought before
okay,
we get
sure.
to that point. Um, yeah, earlier when you said like, oh yeah, back like you said, oh yeah, you can see where it came from the past and how it was rooted in the past. These labels, right? Like or what side you're on. If for simplicity's sake, just if there's just a left and a right, right? And then nowadays, like a lot of people, like you said, they don't view it historically. It's just yeah, it's just whatever side you are. But the thing is, it was never divorced from its class genesis, right? The class was always there. It's just that not a lot of people, especially if you're reading articles, if you're watching news, if you're watching like election debates and stuff, nobody frames it in the way of class. Not a lot of people explicitly say, like these are class interests. These are not just cultural or preference, or like fucking beliefs to the point of religion interests. These are still based on class interests. It's just that people have steered it away. So then when people
Wait,
talk
when you
about
say
these things,
people, well, you're talking about politicians.
yeah, well, politicians, think tanks, people that influence these things, you can argue that a lot of them, they themselves don't see it as a class thing. But the
Why
people
don't
that,
they want to say it's a class thing? Is
it's
there a deeper
either,
value?
it's just the education, it's just the historical lens that they look at everything. Like,
Hmm.
if you're, um, if you're just a random person, like the average Joe looking at the news about just the latest one with George Floyd
Hmm.
and getting killed, and then the whole protest. To you, without without you having an interest or anybody ever giving you like a whole fucking uh, source or lecture about this fucking lecture sounds kind of dumb. Just giving you like the lowdown, the rundown about like this whole historical stuff that leads up to this. You're looking at it as just like, wow, you might not understand what's going on. You might just see it as a black versus white problem, or it's like a minority versus police problem, or it's whatever, right? And on the surface, that is what it is on the surface. But the foundation of it all, you're ignoring what you can't see just from the surface of all of these, like the racial history, the struggle that's based on actually a lot of class, right? A lot of class, a lot of racial history. It's very little of it is based on like the cultural values and shit that you keep on hearing about all the time,
Hmm.
right? It's but that's what you get, and if you're just like the layperson getting exposed to this. So that's what if you're gonna form opinions and stuff, that's what you're forming it on too, right? So with the politicians and a lot of people that influence the way political life is, that's what they kind of see as well. They can't really see down straight into like the molecules of what's going on, like what makes up the actual structure, right? And then because when we're talking about these things, these very big things that like society, country, the relations between people, like it depends on what kind of like fucking political economy discipline you are more convinced by. But um, let's just say for if you're taking like a historical material list, or like a dialectical sort of a disciplined approach to where you're like analyzing it in a very like what Marx did with capital. um the whole thing is kind of like there's the superstructure of society, and then there's a base structure of society, and they kind of feed into each other. So like the superstructure is the law, the politicians, the country, the state itself, the substructures, all the like the economic, the relations of production and everything that actually makes up the foundation that society builds up upon, right? You have like you have the state to enforce fucking property laws and and so forth, so forth. That's how like a superstructure influences the base. But that's I'm just saying like it goes a lot more deeper than just he's black, he's white, he's a cop, he's the other guy lives in the ghetto,
Well, I
and
think there's a lot of subtlety as to like the aftermath. I think that's what really sparked the Like you had the first protest because of the killing, right?
yeah,
But then you had to continue a protest because like they had that speech. I forgot who the guy was, but he was saying like there aren't other evidence that shows criminal charge, and
yeah,
people just got furious when they heard that one, right?
yeah,
They're
exactly. And that's a more visceral, like you can't those people understand the anger, like they feel it, they obviously
Mhm.
all feel it, and like there's and obviously it's going to explode and shit. But the people in charge, or the people that hold the power, they can't deal with it. And like I don't think it's necessarily a deliberate attempt to like put the veil over their eyes. Maybe it is, but it's also like I said, they just don't know because the like the base and the superstructure shit I talked about earlier.
Oh, I see.
It's
They're so far from it.
they're
They
far
didn't
from
see
it.
the.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
can't see it. It's just for them. They're like, fuck, like why did the cops
Well,
have to be like this or whatever, right? It's not like
well, I would. Sorry, I was gonna say like, I guess you could justify like them saying like, well, this is things that they learned in training. This is what they were taught, but obviously the guy took it to an excess,
well, that's the thing.
right?
Like, no matter how many like fucking like tutorial videos you can show to the cops all the time, or each time that something like this happens, or how many like HR vids that you can show, it doesn't get at the root of the problem. It does not. It does nothing
Oh
to
yeah, yeah.
even get people to see, like, analyze it from the base and the superstructure and everything and all the relations that go in between all that, right? And to
So
try
you're
to
saying
put it
it's
together.
beyond.
These are
Sorry,
like
you're saying it's
band-aids.
beyond. You're
Band-aids.
saying it's beyond the individuals.
Oh yes, it's
You're,
always beyond the individuals. Like, even to the point of where you get how you get your breakfast in the morning, that entire process that involves society, bringing the production of that breakfast to your plate, that already influences basically the political structure and the
yeah.
societal structure that you live in, right? But the thing is, we grow up into it. So this, when you see these things, this is normal to you. Like, this is how it should be. You don't see the structural base. You don't see like the superstructure that is on top of it, right? You only know that, just taking the breakfast analogy, you only know that you buy your cereal at the supermarket. You go to, you'll go to the cereal
Oh,
aisle
you're.
and you'll get it,
You don't.
right?
You don't know where the wheat comes from, where
Yeah,
your food comes from. Idea. Yeah.
yeah. And that is the most simplest example, is just where your food comes. If you're gonna talk about something that's more like fucked up, like American racial fucking problem that stems from
Yeah.
like slavery from back then and all that shit, right? There's no hope.
Yeah.
Like, if people
Well, I
don't
think.
even like try, if people don't even analyze it from the first brick, where it's like, oh, where do I get my fucking breakfast in the morning? How does that happen? When you
Yeah.
get to these racial relations and how the fucking these ghettos exist, and how even like how the police is set up, and how like how that
Well,
society is set up, there's
when
no
you're
hope.
talking about the racial, it's very also closely tied to class.
Oh
As you
yes.
say, with black people are generally slavery. A lot of black people, there's a disproportion of black people being in a poorer class than white people are.
Oh yes. I mean, you know, it's a very glaring and obvious class divide, and you can get, and people always want to deal in absolutes too. So, when you say something like, yeah, like the black neighborhoods in America on average, like they are definitely the underclass more so than, an affluent, WASP
What
class of
would you say?
people.
You say people want to deal with absolutes.
Yeah, when
Do
the
you think?
absolutes would be like, they would point to a successful black person and be like, well, that's not true.
Yeah.
You see that guy, you see Obama became president.
Yeah,
And all,
they always pick the one example from the far,
yeah,
and then it's like the extreme examples. But I
yeah,
guess
it's always
the reason
commingled
people
too.
do that.
It's always commingled
The,
too, because on the other side, you
mhm,
get really poor fucking white people, right?
yeah.
Anglo-Saxon, yeah, Protestant, yeah, white,
I think you make a good point. Like when people argue, they always pick these like
yeah,
one-off examples where they don't use data. They're like, well,
yeah.
on
This exists,
average,
so then that can't be true.
this is the income that black or average black family would bring in compared to our average white family in the same like environment or something like
Yeah,
that, right?
exactly. And these things, like, in the reality, of course, these things exist. You're gonna have these commingling of these different people in different stratas, right? But that doesn't mean that the overall point, like the actual point, where it's like, this is a class-based thing. It's this problem is rooted in class, and you can see it rooted in class. Aside from, like, you'll get these cases where you get a successful black person, you're gonna get a really down in the pits fucking white person, right? That all exists. That's all true, but the overall, the big picture is still, it's unavoidable that it's like, the black people, especially in all these ghettos, they're an underclass. If you got 50 Cent that became a multimillionaire, that doesn't mean anything. They're still, as a people, as a whole, they're still the underclass, right? Even if you can point to examples, individual examples of success, you
Yeah.
know, um, and and I think that usually gets used way too much as a counter argument when it doesn't really. It's not. It doesn't even address like if you look at it like, okay, what's the material realities of these people as a whole in aggregate, right? Like if you point to one guy that has more success than the average group, that it doesn't mean anything, right? But this is how these stupid political debates usually get started, and then like, oh, point, and then the counterpoint, and whatever it goes on like a circus like that.
Well, the problem with debate, I think, is you're just like they're teaching in school too. All right, so I don't blame people when they talk like
Yeah,
this. But you
it's another good
nitpick.
point. The school is actually it sets you up to
Sets you
a
sets you up to
procedure.
be
It gives you
yeah.
like a procedure to go through about this, even though like you
Yeah,
said.
because you're supposed to be nitpicking cases that support your view. So I feel like people talk about confirmation bias. You're
Yeah.
taught that in school. You're taught like pick a view, like here's a should black people deserve better or whatever, right? And then
Yeah.
you pick a side, and then you have to pick cases that support your view. And by doing that, you're basically doing confirmation bias. You're only looking for things that support your view.
Right, you're
You're
cherry
not looking
picking.
for
Yeah,
you're cherry
exactly.
picking.
You're cherry picking, and
And
then you're putting it at the same level as if like at the same level as something as big as like the aggregate, right? Or as
yeah,
like the big picture as a whole. You're comparing like a cherry picked small thing to try to counter these. They're not even in the same ballparks, right?
and I feel like that's such a bad way of teaching. I think it's simple for teachers. Like a lot, obviously they don't want you to become racist or whatever, but they're teaching you in a way that kind of it's how your brain works, your confirmation. I think what might be a better exercise is pick the counter view and try to argue against yourself. Like say like does God exist? And if you're
Yes.
religious, you should pick the opposite and see if you could prove to yourself that God doesn't exist, or try to pretend you're someone who doesn't believe in God
You
and
know,
try to see it on their side would be a better
you actually
exercise.
that's a good point because that's the actual like the discipline of dialectical analysis is exactly that. Like you're supposed to pick apart an argument, right? You think about like your example. Does God exist? You pick it apart. Even if you believe in God, you pick it apart, and then you argue for it. You argue against it. You argue for it. You keep on doing it. And the whole point of the dialectical analysis is that eventually you will reach some sort of synthesis, and it doesn't even have to get solved. If it's something that is inherently contradictory, the synthesis that you arise is these things are contradictory. It's not meant to be compromised or whatever, right? You can accept that this is a yin yang situation, that these are whatever opposites. Like this whole thing as an aggregate must be looked as a unity of opposites. If you
Yeah,
can, if you come to that conclusion, but you need to go through that process, that struggle,
I,
right?
I think that process, well, to develop people to be more understanding rather
Yes.
than trying to develop people to be better at being a
Yes,
lawyer.
because right now, yeah, and that's see, yes, exactly. But because my fucking thoughts on it is they argue it like lawyers do, right? Like you can get a murderer off from a case if you can pick out some technicality that dismisses the case or something that's small. It's like cherry picked or whatever, right? But that's how like a lot of law is carried out, where if
Yeah,
you don't follow the procedures or if it's you can get things off on technicality, it's valid. But
yeah, and see, that's the problem. Like
it creates a
I'm
dichotomy.
okay. I think I'm okay if like we misjudge a case and a murderer gets free, but I'm less okay with if we put an innocent person in jail. I think that one is worse.
See,
Like that's
that's funny because that's also a political view as well,
yeah,
and the whole thing creates a dichotomy in a way. If you're not gonna fucking um, come to some kind of like an understanding that you can get a unity of opposites, you're always gonna view as something as the right way and the wrong way, the good and the bad. They're always and there's no way of fucking synthesizing these because if people the way they think, the way they
hmm
approach these problems, especially political problems, because like they
Well, I'm
view it
not
as a
saying my way is right. I'm just saying my preference would be that way.
no. I mean, like your that belief, like like I would rather that. I'm just
Right.
saying that's actually like a widespread political view on like
Mm.
in the Western tradition. It's on the left side where it's like they don't want the death penalty, right? 'Cause they would rather um fucking if a
Oh,
murderer
oh,
or whoever
that's
commits a
interesting.
crime gets walks instead of condemning an innocent
Yeah,
man
because
by the law.
well, yeah, I guess like what was it like something uh beyond doubt or something like that. That's how they
Beyond a reasonable
describe it.
doubt, yeah.
But Elvin doubt, yeah, like I think that one is a fair thing to say. But I don't know, it's interesting to say that's a leftist view because I was curious what view that would be,
It
and
would in
like I
American tradition it would be a left, but here is the caveat. When I'm saying left, I mean like American left would be like fucking this weak dick, like Democratic Party voting fucking left. Like that's not even close to like socialist left, communist left, or whatever, or what's
yeah
really
yeah yeah yeah
left, right? And then when we're talking about right, like everything in America is usually limp dick. This right thing, this super religious, I don't even know what the fuck to call it, like a conservative, anti-science sort of bent, is not really. It's not really like a really right, um, like a worldwide. Traditionally, it wasn't a worldwide right conservative view either, right? Like these things are. If you have to understand that America dominates the conversation, so when people say left and right, they usually mean that in the American context. But in the wide rest of the world, right and left mean a whole bunch of different things. And then if you want to get into further fucking axes, right, then you got a lot more like a fucking authoritarian, libertarian. Like the left and right line becomes all of a sudden like a fucking four quadrant graph. And then if
yeah.
you want to take it another further, it becomes a 3D fucking three axis.
See, that's the thing. I think school does the misjustice as well. Like, it's also asking us to choose a side when they present us. You have communism, you have socialism, you have liberals to conservative, and then and then ultra conservative, I guess.
Ultra conservative, all the way to the super right, which is the
Fascist.
fascist, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
they
but
don't
they'll
explain any
ask
of that
you.
well. Yeah,
They will ask you like where you side, and I think that's also misjustice where the idea is that you have to side with one of them,
plus
whereas
exactly.
rather than asking like which of the beliefs of each of them do you believe in? Because like I feel like every group there's something that's in there that you might say like, oh yeah, I would believe in that, or
Yeah, exactly.
that relates to me. I don't think like just because someone is conservative, you're like, oh, I none of conservatives' values are my values,
Well,
right? Like I don't think
yeah,
no one can be like that.
exactly. They fucking wholesale import whatever side they choose. They wholesale import the accepted beliefs of that side. So like, what if you're an American like right libertarian, you believe in really small government, free markets, all a complete unfettered free market, all that jazz. All of a sudden, you got guys that are saying, yeah, but now, I guess I also have to believe in fucking anti-abortion thought as well, and also gun rights thought, and all those things, right? Like like people import it en masse, like it's a package deal. Where
Mm-hmm.
and the problem goes into because they're taught, they're raised, and they synthesize, they think this way, where
Mm-hmm.
they have to pick a side, and then even if you're gonna fucking even if they weren't going to wholesale import things, even if they have to cherry pick the labels, these labels are already pre-made for them, that they feel
Yeah,
like, yeah, I have to choose this, like
yeah.
these
I,
are
and
the
I
only
keep blaming
choices.
and I keep blaming the teachers, but that might not be their fault. It might be the curriculum's fault, or
Like I said,
and it stems up.
the teachers don't understand. They won't be able to tell you, oh yeah, I'm fucking doing it because of the superstructure and they can't see that shit, right? They're just doing it because that's what the curriculum, like you said, curriculum is made to be like that. The people making the curriculum, they probably don't even view it like that. Like
Yeah,
they don't view it as like that deep
I feel
political
like
economy analysis. They just feel like this is
it's
fucking.
almost like a force beyond anyone. It's like no human did it. It just happened. It's just this system
It's
that.
just there. This is what life was like when they came into this world. It's
I
just
guess
there.
if I was to change the education system, that those are the things I would pick on. I would like dismantle them in a sense and try to.
Yes, I would definitely dismantle that. I would, like even even you'll see this, and it's very prevalent in society, in Western society, and a lot of places in the world. Actually, they don't even know exactly what these things mean. They don't know what liberalism means. They don't know what socialism means. They don't know what communism means. To the point where people think actual communist countries exist in the world right now, right?
Yeah.
And like it's something that has not ever been achieved yet. It's like the Valhalla of left political economy. Like
Yeah.
and then they can't even exactly. They don't even exactly pinpoint exactly what fascism really means. To the point where very recently, in recent years, you get this stupid fucking new thought coming from these stupid like PragerU cocksuckers that are like, oh, you know what? The whole left-right line is actually a horseshoe shape. So, like the further you get from the center of centralism or liberal or whatever on the top of the horseshoe, it curves until the left side and the right side meet each other, which is, communism and fascism just becomes each other.
Wait, that's not a horseshoe. That's a circle.
Well, it's a horseshoe because at the bottom it doesn't really connect. Their own fucking symbol doesn't even make sense.
So then they're just going from a left-right system to a top-bottom system.
They're trying to
the left and right. The most left and right are the top part, and then
they're taking a line and they're just bending the ends just so they can make their reality exist.
Is this guy Christopher Nolan? I feel like it might be.
No, it's like
that's his plot lines. They're always
it's
you
these
take
guys.
a linear story and you bend it around.
No, you see that'd be different. That would be something like neat to see in filmmaking. It's not neat to see some bullshit like this be made in like political fucking like political thinking and whatever, right? It's stupid.
Mm-hmm.
If Nolan could do that with a fucking linear story, that's fucking genius. But if you try to just make fucking fascism and communism just be the same by fucking bending those lines, then that's fucking retarded. And you get guys like Dinesh D'Souza, and you get like fucking Dennis Prager, and a lot of these right guys right now that do that stuff, and a lot of the American political establishment do this on both sides, like Democrats, Republicans. They all subscribe to these stupid things now.
I guess what I wanted to bring as a side note, have you seen the trailer for Tenet? There's a second one.
No,
it's the Christopher Nolan movie.
Yeah, I remember he was saying something like this. I haven't seen it.
It brought more information. I don't know if you want to know too much about it, but it has some really cool ideas, like sci-fi ideas.
I mean, I'd probably check it out eventually. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I think it'll be an interesting movie. I don't know anything about it, but maybe whenever
I'll tell you a little bit because I think this is kind of cool. But they were talking about.
We should probably do a whole episode. We should do a whole episode if we one day we all watch
I don't know if it's a whole episode. The trailer's not that big. It doesn't show you that much.
Like eventually when we actually watch the freaking movie.
Well, I think that'll be an interesting thing because Hollywood hasn't given up people going to theaters, and they're using this movie as the one you must see in theaters.
Oh, to bring back people
to bring back
from the coronavirus.
Yeah, okay. And I guess Nolan is a big enough draw. But it's cool because in the movie they were talking about this new time concept called inversion, where time is going backwards, which is rewinding. And then you see this, the main character, he's shooting a gun, but because he's rewinding time, the scientist was giving him tips like, you're not shooting the gun, you're attaching the bullets, kind of thing. I thought that was hilarious. And as a practicalness, it's actually very easy. Because you just have to film the thing going forward, and you just rewind it. Yeah, and I thought, this the special effect is so practical. You just rewind film, and then you just put it as a movie, and that's it.
They do that for a lot of special effects nowadays. Those martial arts scenes where they have to do something where they sheath a sword or something like that. Real cool. Most of the time when they film it, it's just backwards. They're just rewinding film.
Yeah.
It's easier. It's much easier to do that than to fucking try to take a couple takes, try to get your sword exactly, sheathed the way you want the scene to look like. It's easier to just pull it out.
Pulling it out, and rewinding it, and then it's like, wow, that guy got it perfect.
Exactly.
Actually, that makes sense. Actually, I was thinking Tenet kind of reminds me of the movie The Matrix in a sense of for filmmaking, in a sense where when The Matrix did that bullet time, you started seeing that shit in every movie where everything starts slowing down and
It
the
may
camera
be
is rotating.
it may be if this movie goes down well, it might be like as I guess culturally significant as the Matrix was. Like
Well, yeah,
it's
Matrix
made a
was
new
culturally
frontier.
significant,
Yeah.
but also like for movie techniques or I guess computer graphics, it definitely had the staying power. Like you saw that effect a lot to the point where I feel like what was that movie? Watchmen abused it, where people are just like groaning when you see it. They're like, okay, this is kind of stupid now.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Fucking, it's been a while since I saw Watchmen. Um,
It's doesn't it's not good, and the HBO one is not as faithful as the director was trying to make it towards the comic book.
dude,
And I heard that one was
I
not
was
good.
never really into that shit anyway. So it's no loss for me if it sucks.
Good, good, good.
I know another friend of ours, a good friend of ours. He really likes the comic book stuff, and he's very upset when they do
Yeah,
no justice to it.
people who read the comic books, they're like, it's almost like what we were talking about, the loyalists of like their group. It's like they're like hardcore fans of this comic book and anything. And so far, no one has portrayed it in the image of the creator, Alan Moore. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's enough to disillusion anybody. So if you're gonna be a hardcore fan, most of the times you only have disillusionment and cynicism to look forward to.
Yeah.
What was I
All
talking
right.
about?
So,
Are we going back
you were
to?
talking about how there's a horseshoe that someone took a political linear line and bend it.
Yeah, and this is yeah, that's completely stupid. It's just fucking mental gymnastics to try to make that point, and no, like it's very interesting right now because right now there's a reason why they're doing this, and the reason is that um now that a lot of the Western countries they're facing a lot of difficulties, right? Structural in society, and that's all based on like the economic base, right? They're reaching a point where stuff that they used to have faith in are decaying. So
Are you saying right now, as in because of COVID-19
not
or
because of
because of
it's
Trump
in our
being?
lifetime and even a little bit before our lifetime. You know, like it's decades in the making right now. I would say ever since the end of the Cold War and then America just went batshit crazy with being the sole superpower and also like capitalism running into its late stage and it's going into terminal stage now.
So you're saying, would you not say there's like a golden time, like say like
There was a golden
Obama's?
time. No, it would be way before Obama.
Hmm.
It would be like their golden time was basically 50s, 60s.
Well, sorry, when you say golden time for
The
who?
the Western world, their golden times, like 50s, 60s, 70s, all the way you still kind of get it in the 80s, but it peaks and it goes down. I mean, the absolute peak was when the Soviet Union fell, right?
Hmm.
That's when Francis Fukuyama wrote like the end of history, basically saying like this is it, like this is what human history we've reached the end point. This is what human history is going to look like till the end of days. This is the final
Why?
evolution. This
What was his
liberal
idea?
this liberal democracy, capitalist world. This is it. This is humanity's final form. And he was completely fucking egg on the face, got shat on, especially when all these crises has crept up. Dot-com crisis, fucking financial crises, right? The big, great financial crisis, and all these fucking wars and shit, and like catastrophes that went around, and it just showed the ineptness and incompetence of this established world order, right? Like he Francis Fukuyama, he wrote another book later on. He's like, oh shit, I was totally wrong with that book. He tried to correct himself for that, but like it's famous for unfortunate reasons for him. Like like you never should say this is it. Like if you think about it, like when like when Queen Elizabeth came to power, like is this it? It's like the whole world is gonna be you know Pax Britannica now, right? Like no, right? It's nothing stays static forever, and it was a very simplistic view, but that's what people were thinking of at the peak. That guy's a
Mhm.
fucking political scientist. He's not just some fucking random blogger or fucking YouTube guy. He was a political scientist, and this is what he thought. He was so influenced by the peak of what Western civilization reached with the fall of the fall of the Soviet Union, the peak of Western liberalism. This is what he thought. Make no
Mhm.
sense. Once he sobered up, yeah, it obviously makes no sense. You just have to wait a couple of years. It makes no sense. But I mean, but this fall that they're experiencing right now, they will reach into the past during the glory years to try to find some sort of adversary, some sort of thing to try to rally behind, or try to like motivate them, or try to scapegoat even, right? They need to do these things because like they can't just look
Like, isn't that
introspectively and say this problem is deep within us right now.
isn't that the prime example of U.S. and China?
Yes, yes, that is it.
Because
And
like Trump just made a huge speech about that.
yes, and you can see this is like a shining example on the hill is what's going on between U.S. and China right now, and this coronavirus is this is this mechanism, this catalyst to put it very obviously in front of people. It's blatant. It's in your face right now. That like what they're trying to do, where they failed in their handling of it, and now you know in their failure, they're trying to
Hmm.
rally people. They're trying to rally a cause to try to pinpoint this at one enemy, a
Well,
scapegoat,
I
a
feel like
champ.
they're not just doing that, but they're also using the Hong Kong protests to their side to make them look like we're the savior, we're trying to save Hong Kong, and that China's crossing the line and you know
Yeah, I mean it.
not
It takes
respecting their
it takes a
sovereignty.
lot of it takes a lot of mental. It takes a lot of imagination to feel if you're like Marco Rubio or whoever the fuck in the U.S. to say that China passing this law in Hong Kong is basically a matter that the the U.S. is going to be affected by. Like they need to take action because it affects the U.S. for some reason. It takes a lot of fucking imagination to try to sell it that way. You know, like it, and obviously when you look at someone that's like this will not affect you in any way, America, right? This is just something that you need to fucking put your finger into and get a piece of. And also, like as a smokescreen, as something to get people's focus not on yourselves, but on them. And this whole thing where it's like, China, like they cover the virus. It's gotten so bad. We're so bad at handling this virus. America is because China covered it up for like a couple. Like it covered it up for maybe a week or two more, when they could have been open about it.
It
You
feels
know.
kind of like an individual. Like, say you have a drinking problem
Yeah.
or a gambling problem. You don't admit that, like, I have a drinking problem, a gambling problem. You always look at external things like, oh man, I'm so unlucky, or my family abused, or whatever it is. I
Yeah.
mean,
Externalizing everything.
mhm.
You're
I mean,
offshoring
it,
your
it takes
problem.
it takes some time before you kind of either someone tells you or something that gives you that epiphany. But I'm curious, as a nation, how do they come to that conclusion? Like,
Oh, it's you hit rock bottom. What does rock bottom for nation look like? You basically fucking collapse, or you collapse to the point of collapsing, right? It's up to the
so
people if
so
they wanna.
so same as an individual then. Like, say you're a smoker,
When
you
you
need
reach
to
rock bottom is when you start to see, like the guy,
you need to
like
stop.
Alcoholics Anonymous or like Narcotics Anonymous says, yeah, I
Yeah.
woke up in the gutter with fucking, like fucking something up my ass and just cum stains from hobos, and that's when I realized, yeah, I gotta turn my life around or something like that.
I felt like when you're talking about rock bottom, the whole protest with George Floyd was kind of like that. Like they burnt a building. They burnt the third
Yeah,
precinct of
this.
police. And I'm like, wow, they just got away with it. Like in a sense. And like insane. Like after that building burn, I felt like that's when the arrest happened, which was the day after, right?
This is the. I mean, fucking stuff like this has happened before in America tons of times, but it's
Yeah.
for us more poignant because it's in the present, and also this is our uh experience as adults watching fucking like authority, state authority being attacked in a way from the people, right? From the masses. It's don't think of it as a protest with placards. It's basically kind of like an uprising. Whether
Yeah, you're right.
it's not going to be like a big one that collapses the country. It's I would
Well,
say that this protest is still way small. Like it's not even comparable to what will happen to America down the line when they actually when their contradictions are eat them up even more to the point where they will collapse hard. Like this
yeah,
is just
this is
foreshadowing.
the beginning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is
Well, like
foreshadowing.
as you were saying, the protest, it wasn't just the state of Minnesota that
Yeah,
happened.
it's
It was
across the
like
country.
across the country. Yeah, because California or Los Angeles had a peaceful protest. I heard like um what was the one? There was other states that were having them as
Yeah,
well.
it's the same when these racial protests happen in America. It usually affects the whole country. Like Ferguson was
Well, it even
across
affect
everywhere.
the neighboring country, Canada. Trudeau had to what do you call it? Give a shout out to
Yeah,
George, I guess.
we just because of sheer proximity, right? That we have to deal with.
Yeah,
But if you remember in '93 the Rodney King riots, and then in the '60s the Watts riots, it was basically these racial riots, racial protests that got out of control, and it was based on something like big grievances, from like against black people,
yeah.
black communities, and whatever that started this fucking prairie fire, right? And it usually blows up across the country, and then you'll see that fucking symbols of the state, police cars, police stations getting torched, and cops not being able, they're refusing to go into these places, right? Like you had that for Rodney King in Los Angeles, right? And you saw that happen to the whole country as well. And the thing is, like, people, they shouldn't look at this and be like, oh, you know this is just gonna blow over like all the rest. Well, no, these are not like all isolated incidents. They all have very prominent things in common, right? This racial problem that they have, and like you're gonna, it should already be fucking sobering to people to see that this is a common thing that fucking happens, and it's not like you can just keep having them, and then it will blow and everything will be great.
Hmm.
Eventually this is gonna kill you. Like especially if you're, like I said, you're coming down from that peak. You're fucking on the road to collapse. This shit is going to be those things, those catalysts that tears things apart. They've never dealt with the race problem in America, right? This is going to be one of the things that surfaces up to kill them, like the country. It's going to rip them apart, and that's not even the main problem that America's face. It's like it is this fatal contradiction that their system is decaying, and these things
Hmm.
are just going to come up like pustules, right? The racial thing is going to just blow up like as a symptom of this, and then you have their fucking problem with like their economic problems blowing up, you know their political, their foreign relation problems are also blowing up as well as like these things. When it'll look like multi organ failure at the end of America's life, and you'll see it as this racial problem is like the bad liver that America has. Eventually, it's
What
gonna
do you
it's
what
gonna
do you feel
kill
like
it.
will trigger it? What do you think? Will it be another death, or the loss of jobs, like another
Loss,
pandemic?
that's kind of stuff. It would be from the base. When I was talking about the base and the superstructure, it's gonna come from the base, and the base is the relations, the modes, the organization of production. That is
Okay.
the thing
Well,
that is
like I
going
understand
to.
it's the base, but I guess if you could give a tangible event, what could it be?
You can kind of see the catalyst right now of the coronavirus leading to record unemployment of past a quarter, right? It's for people that have lived in this era. It's like, oh my god, like for economists, this is a fucking disaster. We're not at. You haven't seen shit yet. This is one of those things where it's like, boys, you're gonna see something real special, right? It's gonna get even worse. Not just coronavirus, I mean, but this is just like a trailer to what would actually bring it down, right? The next, like the evolution of how we organize ourselves to produce AI, all that stuff, right? If coronavirus is a temporary thing and it's just because of the sickness that keeps people from at home and stops the economy from fucking circulating.
Well, actually,
Imagine
to
what
add
it
to
imagine
sorry.
just wait, imagine what it happens if it's not like this external virus, but it's actually your structure itself has turned into something where fucking it the current economy it will stop circulating because the technology, the way society is, it's different now. All of a sudden, if
Like
you got like
the lower class just doesn't have money to
they
pay.
they can't work. There's no way they will work because what if we're reaching a point where their productivity and the gains that you can get, the profit that you can actually get from their surplus is it's going
And then
down to zero.
the rich has no one to exploit from, and
Yeah, it was
therefore they
like,
can't make money.
how are you gonna make money? Well, like, who's gonna fucking pay for the? Where's your aggregate consumers, right? To keep it moving, like, that's a base problem, and that's something that will absolutely kill them. And
Yeah,
in their death throes, this racial problem will tear them. Their fucking the way they've thrown their weight around on the world stage, that will tear them apart. The way that they have zero class consciousness and they can't, like fucking even they can't put like an analysis to any of this. To them, it's all just fucking cultural nonsense and labels and shit. They're completely ill-equipped to handle such a collapse. Like if the House of Cards fucking falls right now, they have nothing to fucking rebuild it with.
yeah.
And
I just wanted to point out when you mentioned about coronavirus, even though it's like an external force, it's not coming from the base.
no,
It
it's
does
not true.
show it does show the holes in the sense that when you look at the data, there was also a disproportion of more black people having coronavirus
Oh
than
yeah,
say white people.
oh yeah, your
And
labor force, right? They make up a whole big ton of the working fucking class labor force. And
yeah,
yeah, exactly. And the weaker parts of your economy of your country are gonna get hit the hardest first. And it's very obviously which were the weaker parts, right? Like the more vulnerable parts, I should say. They're completely vulnerable. All of their throats are exposed to the fucking jaws of this virus, right? Like you're not if you live in the Hamptons or in fucking Manhattan or whatever in those rich affluent neighborhoods, yeah, you can it's not a big deal for you. Like you're losing money on stocks and investments at the most, right? You can't go out to golf. But for everybody else, it's like, fuck, how do you survive? If the virus doesn't kill you, starvation will, or whatever, right?
mm. So kind of wrapping back to political views.
Yeah.
Do you think it's do you think it's even important to know what your political view is, or is it more important to identify what class you are
A
in?
consciousness, the second one, by far. It doesn't matter what the fuck you label yourself. You just have to identify what your place is in this society and what directly affects you. And that is unalienable from class, right?
Mm,
Class is built from that, what your station is in this
yeah.
society.
And I think that's the challenge is that, like you were saying, that people are so focused on class, or sorry, so focused on political views or political sides that
Yeah.
they're misguided
Meaningless
from the class.
labels. Exactly.
Yeah.
It is a blindfold. And like I said, a bunch of the people that influence this, most of them are oblivious to it. But the ones that aren't oblivious to it, and most of the time the ones that aren't oblivious to it are very, very rich class, the moneyed class, because
Yeah.
they can identify what their interests are, like in a way, where they can see, like, if this blows up, all my shit is in danger, right? It's in my interest to make sure that these guys don't realize that they're getting the shit end of the stick, the lower class, the underclass, the working class. And I don't want them to fucking have this consciousness that, their station in life directly is getting screwed. I don't want them
Hello.
to Hello?
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
did I cut off for a sec?
I feel like it, but go ahead.
Yeah. For them, as I was saying, it's the rich, super rich guys that are conscious of their own class. They don't want these guys the masses to get this consciousness of their station in life. They don't want them to kind of like organize and push back against them, right?
So one thing I'm wondering is, you have the Democrats and the Republic, and generally they say the Democrat are like the higher class, the people who are like the Silicon Valleys, the businessmen, things like that, and then the Republic is the working class. But in previous podcasts, we talked about how both these political views aren't for any of the working class. They're
No,
both
yeah,
for the rich
exactly.
classes.
No, and it flip flops like fucking. It's a very recently that Donald Trump tries to um, position himself as the man that working class people would want to vote
Right,
for.
which is ironic because he's a billionaire or a
Yeah,
millionaire
like
or whatever.
it always Democrats for a lot of the decades prior to this was positioning itself as the class for these people. Like the minorities, the working class, and whatnot. And then it always flip flops. Back then during Lincoln's time, the Republicans were the ones that wanted to free the black slaves, right? And now fucking Republicans are more likely to be the ones that look down upon the riots. Anytime a black neighborhood riots, right? It it's always fluid in that sense because these parties are just real in reality just one party. They just put on different fucking clothes each time. They represent one
Ah,
interest, right? It's
that's the hot take here.
they represent one
Democrat,
interest.
Republic, you're basically one party.
There, yeah, they are. It's the Democratic Republican Party. It's just two parties that are just go. It's theater. They go after each other for theater,
But it's so
and
funny because like the base themselves are like so proud to be a Republican. They're like,
exactly.
isn't there they're saying like I was like I've been a Republican for 30 years and my dad before me was
Yeah,
Republican and my
I'm gonna
grandpa
vote Republican. I'm
and
gonna vote Republican. I'm gonna vote Democrat. Oh,
and
it's a
like
big deal.
as we say in the modern day, they kind of represent the same party. Like they're just interested in a sense you could almost say conservative, right? Both
Yes,
party just wants to keep the status
status
quo
quo.
they want. It's just that there are some, I guess you could say that there are some political people or businesses that would prefer one party over another. But essentially, if you're on the top, you're gonna benefit if as long as there's no, I guess, independent that would
Yeah,
or Bernie Sanders, I guess.
yeah, exactly. Bernie Sanders was seen as an insurrectionist within the Democratic Party, right? So they definitely didn't want that. And this whole thing about like never Trump, it's fucking like it's wool over people's eyes because if they really believe in the slogan, well, like anybody but Trump, then they would have gone for Bernie Sanders. He's not a Trump, right? He would have fucking pulled in a lot more support, right? But
Well, that's the other role in their eye. They're just saying that Biden had a better chance. That was the way they tricked people.
out of the entire party apparatus, they think this fucking guy, this senile man that fucking like spends a little bit too much attention on fucking young girls and shit. This is their best. This is their champion that they put
I
up.
felt like it's actually helping him. Like, didn't Trump get more ratings because of allegations of him grabbing women by the pussy, even though they recorded that of him saying that.
Whatever. He's Teflon Don, man. He's just because he can make the zingers when he needs to. Joe Biden
Yeah.
can't make a zinger if his life was on the line for.
Singers are he just brushes off. Ah, like when he like kind of stumbles on the word,
Yeah, he just has a brain meltdown on TV.
which is hilarious.
But I mean, like Bernie Sanders, he was going up against a fucking hill. Like the guy, like he was representative of probably as left as an American politic can actually get in this current environment.
Why didn't
There's no way that like I'm not gonna say there's no way, but like the odds were stacked up against him because
Oh yeah.
like
Oh
50,
yeah. It
60
was
years of Cold War, fucking schooling, propaganda, living life on the opposed to fucking what you feel is communist, what you label as communist. That does have an effect on people, right? It's like, oh, you want to be a fucking Democrat, Republican, or you want to be a fucking like what, like a monster, and vote for a
and that's
socialist.
that's that's the thing we need independence to represent. I know it's like I know it's almost impossible.
It's
I know
very
it's
impossible because it has to come from the base, right? There's no way
yeah.
they're gonna let an independent party come out here organically, like just fucking. There's always gonna be struggle when something like that happens, right?
And that's the thing is the base falls into these like Obama characters to think like, oh yeah, he's black, he's gonna change things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he may have changed some things. But in reality,
Pretty
nothing's
much nothing.
changed.
Yeah, the
Nothing's
stuff that
changed
matters.
permanently because once he left, things reverted back or things
Yeah.
reverted for worse.
Oh yeah.
It's like great. It took him 4 years to get Obamacare, and you probably had it for about maybe 4 years, and then Trump took it away the next year.
Yeah, exactly. It's like oh fucking, and it's not like it was something that was super great, or else people wouldn't have fucking like they would be like, no, fuck you,
Oh
give
yeah,
me my
yeah.
dead
There's also
body before you
criticism.
take it away, right? No, if people are like, you know what, this kind of sucks anyway. So who wants to
Yeah,
fucking like keep this, right?
exactly, exactly. It wasn't like there's a like say you're in a country like China, you cars weren't really a big thing. Everyone's been riding bikes, and rather they give you a car, they gave you you know a lesser car, I guess, a smarter
Let's
car, I guess, like a smart car, and you're like, yeah, okay, I don't really care for smart. They're not that great.
or something.
I get to where I need with the bike as fast as a smart car. Like, what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the difference is like it's like you have the rest of the world driving cars already, but your country is still on the horse carriage. And Obamacare is basically just a more upgraded version of the horse carriage. You're not giving them the fucking car that is the eventuality of
Yeah,
just
but
fucking
it was sold
universal
like it.
healthcare. It's sold
It
like
was
it.
sold like
It was
it.
sold like you know what? You don't ever have to fucking be late traveling anywhere again because we're gonna make sure that you can get the horse carriage that you can afford, right? People are like, well, this my past horse carriage was way better than this piece of shit horse carriage that Obama provided. And then it became a thing where it's like, oh, this is why fucking cars don't work because the horse carriage that we got from Obamacare, that's basically what a car is. So obviously that didn't work, right? That's how the argument against the modern day health system is in America, where it's like Obamacare, they equate it to like socialized healthcare, and
Hmm.
then they use it as this is why it's bad and this is why it's useless, it's worthless, it can't work, when in reality no one ever provided them. In our analogy of the car, no one actually provided anybody with a fucking actual car. No one, it was just another horse carriage, and people
Yeah,
said it was a car to make it into a fucking political debating point, right?
yeah. It does become infuriating. I feel. The thing I guess I wanted to bring. Oh shoot, I had it in my mind. Oh, I think I lost it. Okay, never mind.
um well, you want to talk about the Hong Kong protests? Because we can pivot over to the fucking the Chinese side
Yeah,
of
sure.
things.
I don't know what the new law is. I know people are really upset about it, but what's the new law here?
On the surface of it, it's just a national security law. It was proposed all the way back then in already 2003, but then there was a lot of protests, and the chief executive at the time just kind of fucking his spine. He was spineless, right? So he's like, whatever, just it's too many
So
protests.
you're saying Carrie Lam is she
Oh,
has a
she is
spine now?
completely no. She no. See, back then, like who was it? Dong Jianhua or whoever the fuck was CE. He had a lot more, like fucking if he doesn't want to implement it, the central government in Beijing's like, okay, whatever, fuck it then, right? Nowadays, the central government in Beijing are not like, you know what, if they can't implement it, we're not gonna be like, fuck it. We're gonna be like, you know what, we're gonna get this done because it needs to be done now. Like this is enough horse shit now. Like you've seen what happened with Hong Kong all this time. Like this is what autonomy. This is what their fucking way of dealing things has resulted in. So you know what? If you, if fucking here's the national security law, and it's gonna go through. And the funny thing about Hong Kong, not a lot of people realize, like, um, it's kind of like one of those I don't want to say official things that are known, but it's like unofficially known that it's a hotspot for a lot of like government NGOs and fucking spy agencies and whatnot. They can still operate freely in Hong Kong, right? So like a lot of like different countries' interests, they all have some kind of shop set up in Hong Kong because China, to its word, has kind of like just had a really hands-off approach with it. So, Voice of America, like propaganda arms of the U.S. government have like base of operations basically set in Hong Kong, right? They can't go into the mainland and do shit, right? Because it's impossible. It's fucking, that shit is locked up tight against them. But in Hong Kong, they proliferate freely. You can even see that, like back then the U.S. Navy just made port calls to Hong Kong whenever, right? They'll never make a port call to mainland China, but to Hong
Right.
Kong, no problem. So the security law is basically it's not just the Chinese, it's not just like the government, not just the Chinese Communist Party, but like the people of all China, mainland China, got so disgusted with like the way Hong Kong has been acting like with all the protests and rioting and over this stupid extradition law,
Mm-hmm.
that there's just like, what, fuck it, like throw them the book. Like the most forceful voices from China are actually from the people itself. The most lenient voices from China are from the Chinese Communist Party, where they're still
Mm-hmm.
like saying, like we believe in two systems, and
They're the politics,
they want to
the
be, yeah, they,
politicians.
right, but the people are like, fuck them. That's literally, they're like, fucking, like, how they're enraged that you can get beaten up in Hong Kong for speaking Mandarin right now, right? It's absolutely infuriating to them that like a piece of Chinese territory you can get
It's
your
the
ass
George
kicked.
Floyd. It's the
You,
George Floyd effect.
yeah, but imagine this is not like a minority. This is like the entire
It's
billion,
your own people.
right? Like this is your own people. This is your power base. This is where everything is. The country, like the Hong Kong protesters, they're fucking stupid, unimaginably stupid to the point where like you've shot yourselves not only in the foot, you riddled your own body with bullets with your actions because the entire people are against you, right? And this is the fucking. Well, if you think about things that matter, this fucking matters. So this security law is born from that. It's born from that anger, and it's also born from this changing realities in the world, where it's like America is getting more hostile.
So wait,
This thing
the
in Hong
security
Kong.
law. What does it do that got Hong Kong really riled up, or the protesters? Let's just say.
For your everyday life, it does nothing. It's new laws that beef up it beefs up Hong Kong to be able to deal with sedition, terrorism, and acts of secession. So even the protesters right now, not a lot of, like 99% of them, this law will not affect them. But the ones that were soliciting help from foreign organizations or even from foreign states itself, like when Joshua Wong went to go talk with fucking,
Oh, like the UN kind of thing.
yeah, well, they actively solicited help from the U.S. government to try to come in and intervene in Hong Kong. That
Right.
would put him in fucking hot water. That would be a law that would be like,
Oh, I see.
basically on the point of treason, right?
So
And
then, what if Trump invited himself, like in his speech, he was saying like, "We're gonna side with Hong Kong."
it doesn't matter. It's all just talk. Like, what are they going to do? Like, what matters in the world is if you can put your force there. So unless World War
Okay,
Three
I guess
happens,
true.
right?
You're right.
Nothing's gonna. It's just talk, and all of this is blown up anyways because fucking Macau has had this forever. Pretty much since the handover, Macau has had. They passed their laws early on when in the early 2000s, both Hong Kong and Macau were both to pass their laws. Nobody
Well,
protested in Macau, they passed it. Hong Kong protested, they didn't pass it. And
we
like,
talked about Macau being the good child. It's a very different
yeah,
temperature, I would say, compared
yeah,
to Hong Kong.
exactly, and it has to do with a lot of history as well. A lot of Macau
Yeah.
turned out the way it is because of what happened in its history, right? And even though both it and Hong Kong share the same privileges in this two systems arrangement, you can see how different. Yeah, like you said, you can see how differently they take the whole
Wait, why
thing.
is it two system? Is it the China and Hong Kong system? That's
Yeah,
what
yeah.
they
It's
count
like
as here.
they count. It's supposed to be one country, two systems. So
You're right,
everything
but it's
is
not.
China, but it's governed. The laws and stuff is different in Hong Kong. They have
Oh,
their
okay,
own set of
I
laws.
was just gonna criticize that. It's not. It's like there's a lot of systems because like if you it depends who you count. Like if you count Macau, you count Hong Kong, there's like
Technically, yeah.
Taiwan,
You know what?
the
Technically,
bad.
even Canada. No, yeah, even Canada, we would technically be one country, two systems. It's just what the way Quebec is fucking arranged that's a little bit different than other
Oh yeah,
provinces,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's
Canada,
however
Canada
far
should totally adopt
it's
that.
however far you want to take it, right? Like Hong Kong, by comparison, has a shit ton of autonomy that a lot of places can only like fucking circle jerk to, right? Like
Yeah.
Catalonia in Spain, which is very like they have this tension on like separatism as well in Spain. They would fucking shit their pants. They would nut if they had the same autonomy that Hong Kong
So
does.
what does benefit Trump by siding with Hong Kong? Is it, as we
It's
were
the
talking about
thorn.
previously,
It's the thorn
the
against
enemy thing?
China. Yeah, the
Oh, okay.
enemy and my enemy is my friends. Right. This is Hong Kong is the protesters are protesting against China, mainland
Oh,
China.
okay. So that's nothing. So U.S. doesn't really care for Hong Kong if China wasn't involved, essentially.
If it wasn't involved, yes, exactly. Because I
Yeah.
didn't hear the United States coming out strongly against Catalonia when Catalonia, if you remember, a couple years back, basically voted to kind of succeed from Spain. And then Spain came back and fucking sent in the government forces to fucking take back Catalonia, right? Like
Well,
if
mhm,
people listen to this ever heard of it, fucking my point is made, right?
yeah. Well, I guess you're like you say, it's. I guess a lot of nations they don't want to get into these battles, right? They don't want to deal with drama
Well,
because
it's
they already have
no.
their
Well,
own.
they would love to get into it if it's to deflect blame, because all you have to do is talk.
Yeah, yeah,
That's all
exactly.
they have to
It,
do, right? They don't have to put any skin in the game. All they have to do is talk, and the news eats it up too, right? So you can
true.
you create this you create a fucking a scapegoat. It's a decoy. It's perfect decoy. You don't have to commit any troops. You don't have to commit resources. You don't have to fucking mobilize the country on a war
Yeah,
economy footing.
I guess
It's just
you're right.
talking.
By
It's cheap.
the media, you're able to get the hearts of the people without expending any real material.
No, yes, exactly. Zero material spent. All it is talking. So of course they would love to get into it, no matter what
Yeah, yeah.
country. And if you're one of the Five Eyes, which is in like the intelligence fucking block that is centered around America. Like Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Britain, all those guys that share intelligence really closely and have a lot try to align their foreign policies with each other, then you're scoring brownie points by saying the same shit, right? You're getting into America's good graces. You're getting good boy points if you say the same stuff.
So
Like,
do people like Joshua Wong and I guess the leaders of the protest know that these are meaningless promises from US, like the support and
no,
all that?
because they're betting their lives, not really their lives. They're betting their fucking, yeah, they're betting their reputations and shit on it. Like they're betting their fucking, they're gonna risk like criminal, like fucking charges against them and stuff. And to them, but see, to them, it feels like a heroic cause. Like they would want to go to jail. Like they view it as like this is a very noble thing. This is a very Nelson Mandela way of existing, of living life. I'm gonna be a hero to all the people of for freedom and democracy. Like they view
Hmm.
themselves as these martyrs. Kind of like how fucking like ISIS views themselves as martyrs when they go and kill infidels. These guys, they're not as extreme as head cutting, but it's the mentality is the same. You know,
Yeah.
replace infidel and Christian powers with China. That's what they feel like. Like anything to bring China down for the sake of fucking whatever their value, whatever their notion of fucking freedom, democracy, and all that fucking liberalism bullshit is. They feel like, yeah, I'm gonna be the the one written in the history books as the hero in this
Yeah.
struggle. They're not viewing it as like you're all a bunch of idiots that can't make any of this sense, like get this shit straight. Like if you did the same thing in these other countries would have prosecuted you for fucking treason. You know, like they doing well. If in America you even did anything like this with Russian or Chinese collaboration, like forget it. You're fucking done. You see all those Chinese scientists that get kicked out from whatever, from like
Hmm.
very very sensitive positions just because they have a suspicion that they may have a like more may have warm ties with like a Chinese government or something, right? Like it's just they can't like fucking Joshua Wong. Those guys are morons. They live in a fairy tale. They view themselves as the fucking martyrs and heroes. And like
Well,
this.
I think a lot of people who are running these, they don't. If they see themselves as morons, they wouldn't be doing it.
Exactly. Right.
They have to see themselves as like that's the thing about being your own protagonist. No one sees themselves as the villain. We
Yeah.
always view ourselves as the protagonist.
The
So,
Chinese, and when we get back, like we talked about like the fucking left and right and the really fast history of like how these things came to be, the political arrangement in the West. In China, it kind of follows. It's different from what you would find in America or Canada or Britain. Britain, just because of a long history of whatever civil wars and strife and coming out from monarchy, may have some more similarities, but forget it. If we live in Canada and America, right? Like you're not going
wait,
to get the
so
same
are you trying to
experiences.
say if you're a Hong Kong protester, you're on a certain political spectrum versus
Yeah, well, yeah. If
someone
you're from
who,
Hong Kong, you pretty much subscribe. If you're on average, if you're a politically tuned person in Hong Kong that subscribes to that got your training or your influence from Western education, you view Hong Kong very similarly to like how a Western political thought would be. Like liberal democracy is the way to go, right? Multiple political parties, universal suffrage election,
all right.
democracy, sort of that way, right? It's mainland China is completely different political
So
history
their
than how
spectrums don't
China.
even match then.
They wouldn't
Like,
match.
how do you? It's like they're not on the spectrum. Then it's
Yeah,
almost like they just have different views.
yeah. Like the political thought is very already vastly completely different because China subscribes at its base to a very Marxist socialist foundation, right? And like you're not thinking liberal democracy with like the capital L liberalism is the way to go. You're going through scientific fucking socialism, like the dialectical materialism and historical materialist thought, and you're subscribing to like the advancement of productive forces towards towards the inevitable change to a new system, and then more evolution after that to eventually reach communism, right? Post scarcity society. Completely different, right? The left right is different. Like left in China means something completely different in America, even in Hong Kong. In a few ways, I would say even if you subscribe to being like a mainstream Marxist in Hong Kong, it will be different to what the mainstream Marxist would be in mainland China. Mainland
Well,
China,
I
if
guess
you're Marxist, you're more likely following like the Maoist sort of development. Where in Hong Kong, the fucking long hair, one of the politicians, I don't know what his name is in English, but they call him fucking long hair. He is like a self-described Marxist, wears like a Che Guevara shirt everywhere. So but he's fucking completely against the Chinese government and the Chinese like entire, like modern People's Republic historical being, right? So it's already different. You can there's a big difference in political thought between the two places
Well, I
already.
guess what I'm trying to say, or what I'm thinking is that because they're different political, because of the frame of reference, like we were talking about, it's hard for people from the West to relate to the
It is
issues that
very
China and
hard.
Hong Kong have.
It's absolutely it's to a lot of people it's unfathomable, especially in Canada, U.S., even Great Britain. They'd be like, like I could see a lot of Canadians when they make the comments like, why don't they let them be independent? Why does China can't let these places be independent? We let
Hmm.
Quebec have an independence referendum. Why can't you do the same? Right? And
Hmm.
the opposite side is, well, obviously, like to a Chinese person, that's completely insane, right? That is antithetical to the entire existence of the country, and it's not just the People's Republic, but it's the entire identity as, like as what it means to be Chinese. Like, this sovereignty, this unity of the people is deeply ingrained, right? Like your like ancestral legends and stories are basically based on stories of wars of unification and what happens during separate when the states separate, right? Three Kingdoms period. What did all the fucking warlords want to do? They wanted to fucking unify the whole country, right? Like it's a
Hmm.
completely different mindset. Like if you're fucking from Quebec, yeah, you want to fucking separate. You want to have referendum. You're French. The other guys are English. What's the big? Like why the fuck you stay together, right? This is different. Like in China, it's like three kingdoms thousands of years ago that split apart from like from one dynasty. They want to restore basically the country all under heaven. That's the stated goal of all three of them, right? Before them,
Hmm.
seven states warring against each other. What do they want to do? Restore the central
They've been
authority.
they've been they've been through this
Like this is
storyline
this
before.
is the this is the history. This is thousands of years of worth of history to the point where Chiang Kai-shek didn't even want a second seat on the United Nations just because he didn't want to be known in Chinese history as the guy that fucking that split up China as two separate entities on the UN stage. He refused. He didn't want that fucking black mark on his name, right?
Yeah, gotcha.
So, but now the influence, the way that people are brought up usually is a lot of it is devoid from history. Like the current parties, the current separatist parties in DPP, and also the current separatist people, the protesters in Hong Kong, they've subscribed 100%. They've just wholly imported the Western political thought and experience to themselves. So they would be the ones asking these questions where it's like, well, why don't we have a referendum like they would have for
So
Scotland?
maybe I was right for my friend to leave Hong Kong when they got back to Canada or when they were under China's rule because they left because they weren't sure what was going to change, right? Um,
See, the
so
thing is, nothing changed. And that was the problem that was
true.
China's problem. It was two hands
Yeah, in the
off.
beginning nothing changed, but now things are changing. I would say that
In
it,
reaction, right?
in reaction, yeah.
And it's also it's not something that's all of a sudden these things are changing. These things, like I said, this national security law was on hold indefinitely ever since 2003, right?
Hmm.
Like it's Hong Kong is notorious for being this sort of, it's viewed as this like spoiled entity, where it's like we're literally
Karen Lam made that a point.
we're hands off, as the mainland is as hands off as possible as you can get towards a territory that's under your sovereignty, right?
Well, I guess what I'm predicting is what is the end game? Because I feel like the end game is
Oh, the end game is easy.
people, the people who are the protest side are likely gonna migrate to a Western world.
Yeah,
And
they're gonna lose it. So either they're gonna have to fucking leave if they can't fucking deal with that shit, or they will have to just deal with that shit, grow up, and just live life like they do. Like no one in Macau is fucking like erupting right now. They've had this fucking extradition. They've had this national security law ever since fucking handover, right? No one.
yeah,
It's just fucking like the place is as hands off as you can possibly get, to the point where foreign foreign entities, government entities, can set up shop, whether it's even civilian, even military attaché, or whatever kind of entities. You can set up shop in Hong Kong on the sovereign Chinese territory. You can set up shop, and you can exist there with impunity, as long as you don't fucking like try to actively attack or subvert. Like
yeah,
nowhere in the world, there's no place in America where the People's Republic of China or the Russian Federation can set up like fucking FSB headquarters on American soil. There's no equivalence, right? And there's no way that like they would let uh, people on American soil fucking protest and then wave around Russian flags saying that, I hope fucking Putin comes over and intervenes and helps us against against our government, right? There's no way. Like this is an act of treason in a lot of countries, right? It would be seen as that way already.
all right.
So
So I'm thinking of wrapping up, but did you have any other points
yeah, I
on?
mean, like, okay, so the whole This
Hmm.
whole political thing from China is like, yeah, um, people can't, people in the West can't really even fucking put their fingers on what China is supposed to be politically, right? They're always confused as, oh, what is it? Is a state capitalist country? Is it still like a, is it a communist country? Is it,
Hmm.
it's closed off like Maoist, or is it like a North Korean closed off Juche country? They can't wrap their minds of it because at the first place they can't even fucking come down to what the fuck communism is, right?
Hmm.
So right off the bat, they don't understand. Like they think Chinese Communist Party, and you're telling me that the country's not communist. It's like, yeah, like that the party. You're not whatever the country's not whatever the party is. The party is like, a stated fucking goal. Like its its purpose is to eventually bring communism to China, right? However long that may be, and that means what that means is developing people to the point where scarcity is no longer an issue. Like the thing that plagues humanity right now is scarcity. You don't have
Hmm.
infinite amounts of anything, right? And because of that, you have to find, like people have to find ways to distribute the finite things. Communism is getting to the point where scarcity is not a plague upon people anymore. Like you can get to a point, you're striving to get to the point where abundance is what the norm is, and there's not a lack. People will not have a lack of anything, and thus, like that's what the Marxist sort of thinking goes. That point, human potential is fully unlocked. If you're not constrained by your material limits, you can live your life at the full way that humanity was meant to live life. That it's a goal, right? So people thinking, oh, it's a state capitalist now because they introduce some free market mechanisms. Like fuck no, right? Like, and the people on the like Che Guevara and fucking left are like, well, they've betrayed socialism because they've introduced the market economy. It's not like whatever. They can't get it. They can't get a clear picture on it. So there's no hope of trying to fucking analyze it correctly when people in the mainstream can't even decide what the fuck is going on in the first place. So you get a lot of really bum analysis all the time from even like big American think tanks, American Enterprise Institute, right? Fucking Rancor, Brookings. They all have their own version of what the policy on China is, molded upon what their assumptions and their analysis are, right? It's all fucking off the mark all the fucking time. And the funny thing is, I don't know this. The funny thing is that it's as easy as just getting people to just fucking read Chinese. Is this recent coronavirus thing? Like, this recent
Wow.
coronavirus thing, it's so infuriating because all you have to do is read Chinese to see that what the news is saying is bullshit. Like
I
none
feel
of
like reading Chinese is not an easy thing.
it's extremely like if I can fucking get myself up to a level where I can, it's not my first language. I'm gonna be slower at reading it than English, right? But if you read stuff like that, like
Okay, listen. If
it's
Americans' reading level can't even read past like say junior high, and like say the president's speech is like at a grade school, what's your expectation that they're
you
gonna read
know,
Chinese?
you don't have to get every American to do it, but like if you're gonna get the news to fucking report on something, why don't they just report on what's actually written?
Oh well,
Why don't they report on what's actually like coming out? Like just what, take
the
the whole
news
fucking
has
document,
news media has
translate the whole
another
thing.
issue.
Just take Google Translate and just scan the whole document and just put that on. Don't even have anybody write opinion columns. You know what? You want to get stories on like, oh yeah, what do you want? What do you want to know about the
Oh,
government announcements about coronavirus?
but
There you go.
media
Post
is all about opinion. They're not about facts
exactly. So
anymore.
now you get
If
this
anything, you should have a facts column.
exactly. So it's facts call. That's what the newspaper was supposed to be, right? That how they
Yeah,
envision what the
but
press
I
is.
feel like
It's just
it's a
supposed to be a
flip.
giant facts column, right?
But like everything is opinionated, and
Everything is.
you should just get a facts column. Like, hey, here's the facts column, and then there's like zero opinion. This is like factual. something at least someone who wants to stay informed but don't want to be ill-informed could read.
You know what? But you know what? I have more like respect for like the people that don't pay attention to this shit, right? Like that they go through their everyday lives. They don't really care about too much about politics, and they just and whatever opinions they get from media, that is the media's opinion that's fed into them. I have more like I have, let's just say, more compassion for their ignorance than I
Yeah,
have for people that think that
they
think they're
know.
fucking in tune to it, and they spew this stuff out with like authority, thinking
I
they
think
know.
I am compassionate to those people because it's not their fault. It's the media. They don't know any better. They're spewing things because the media plays on their emotion, and this is what they're fed. It's like the education we were taught.
Yeah,
Like, why are we confirmation biased? Well, we were taught to be. We were
yeah,
taught to pick a side or pick an argument and only handpick things that support us rather than doing the opposite, which is more challenging,
yeah,
which could be more challenging for students at the time. I don't know.
yeah. And even
Uh,
when they talk about education reform and all that stuff, the reform that they're talking about is more of like an aesthetic, like a fucking more like a more it's almost like kind of like a hippie, meaningless reform too. They're like, oh, the classrooms nowadays are set up during a time during the industrial period time where
yeah.
you're training people to be factory workers. Well, now you have to
Yes.
be more like free thinking spirits, and you have to get
Yeah.
more like the tech innovation guys and whatnot. And then you think about like, okay, well, how do you still don't train people to analyze anything in life like competently. You don't give anybody the tools to make any kind of like material analysis. You expect
Well,
them all to begin voting at
there's
18.
a point. There's a
Right.
point I think I wanted to make. I forgot to make it, but when we're taking picking sides and stuff, we have to even think about our own brain.
Yeah.
Our brain isn't a one voice. It isn't like you're a captain of the ship. Like your brain is like a council of people. You have thoughts of like wrong thoughts, you have good thoughts, and they're always competing. Your brain is always competing with itself, like as to what decision you make, right? So when I say like when you're reading political views, rather than taking sides, it's best to just kind of look at each category and see what are the values that matches you, because that's more likely correct than you picking on one.
It has
Because like
to.
again, we're not a single voice. We're many voices in
That
one.
would be an improvement over what we have now, but like you would still
Hmm.
need more. You like those values that you would associate yourself like you would want to know the why. Like what the hell's going on with these values? What do they mean when it's
Yeah,
like
I mean, yeah, you could delve deeper. Like, why do people have certain values? Like, why do people want to like want laws to be the way they are? Is
yeah,
because their upbringing is from a wealthier family and it benefits them and stuff. Yeah, it's a good thing to question.
well, yeah,
Uh,
even if we take that earlier belief that you had, that is one part of the on one side of political beliefs that were that thing against um uh punishment, right? Punishment by law, right? Like you would rather the law not be abused and the result being a murderer walks free rather than it being abuse to the point where it's like an innocent person will be caught in the dragnet and dying, right? Like people when we have to analyze that, but not at its face value, like oh, like because I feel strongly about this, or like this is, I feel like this is the right thing to do. They have to analyze like what does this mean, like in society as a whole, like what does it mean? You can be either one, you can be whatever choice. It's just that like people have to stop thinking like oh, I think this way. The person thinking the opposite way must be a bad person, or
mhm.
like this is good, this is bad, and there can be only one way. Like
I
you're
think
basing it off
that's the
something that's right, that you
yeah, I think
feel is
that's an
right,
issue.
or you feel is wrong.
We villainize people who have different values. I think that's a challenge.
Yeah,
We
these countries that have the death penalty and it's working for them, you have to analyze what are the reasons why, like
mhm.
why do they have it like this, and how is it working for them, and there's
Yeah.
countries that exist that abolish the death penalty and it's it's they're working for them as well. So it's like why, what in their history and their historical development, why did
Mhm.
this work for them?
Yeah.
And why can Switzerland have big, like fucking big widespread ownership, but not have the same fucking gun problems as America does, right? Why does, like, I don't know, fucking whatever place, Mexico, I guess, ban guns, but they have such a terrible fucking situation with their guns compared to Asian countries that ban guns and they are very successful on not having gun related deaths, right? Like you have to get down to the why and how and all the other stuff and realize that if you're gonna make decisions, like, and everybody is supposed to make important decisions, right? Technically, like you're eligible to vote at 18. Like, how do these work? What do you want?
Sponsored by
Yeah, what do you
mail-in
want to fucking work?
ballots.
Yeah, like, what do you? Why does this work? And what do you want to work? And what kind of direction you want to take it in? None of this happens. None of this happens during time to fucking vote. What
Yeah.
happens is just like
Actually,
a circus. It's a
on the
popularity
small
contest,
tangent,
right?
on the yeah, on the tangent, I just want to close this off with our podcast because I gotta go soon. But
Okay.
um, Trump was furious with Twitter, where Twitter was fact checking Trump's tweets.
Yeah,
Did you see that?
he wants to fucking
That's the best.
close Twitter.
So
He
like,
wants.
I feel like Trump is just picking enemies with everyone, right? He wants to end social media, which is hilarious, which is ironic because that's his source of power, I think, social media. So I don't understand why he wants to
He is
end it.
because it went against him at that. His tweets went against him,
Yeah,
so he's like, "Oh, fucking, we should do something about these tweets."
Twitter was against him. Yeah,
Trump is very simple to analyze. It's very simple. It's a breath of fresh air. Like he's very, and it's good for that point. Like his base likes him because he does the things that they anticipate him to do. Right? Fucking,
yeah,
you go against him, he doesn't like you. As simple as that.
yeah.
There's no kind of ideological guess with him. You don't have to do that like you did with like Obama. Like if you're supporting him and shit, you're trying to fucking guess why he would do this and what his values
It's
are.
true
Blah,
because
blah,
Obama's a little tougher because he is a black, right? So he's a minority,
blah.
but he's also in a Democratic position.
Well,
So
he's a
like,
trained politician. That's the thing, right?
he's a trained
He's a
politician.
skilled
So
orator. He's a trained
and he's
politician.
still giving money to the pockets of the rich and the
Yeah,
whites, right? So
yeah.
it's more complicated.
And American tradition. Like it's very recently. Well, not really very recently, but it was in the recent time periods when I was like, you know what? Part of the reason why America has such a big libertarian movement, where it's just like, like an anti-government, like no government, government is bad sort of movement that goes on. The reason why they do it, a lot of it isn't just their fucking whatever out to lunch. A lot of it, I think it's just because their government is so fucking incompetent at a lot of things that they have a very strong, like, don't let government touch anything sort of mentality. Don't rely on the government. If the government says, what can I do to help? You want to treat that as a fucking leprosy. You don't want that near you.
It's a threat.
Yeah, like, don't tread on me because, like, I've lost faith there's no faith in the government. The whole country
Yeah.
is built to kind of oppose the government. Like they expect it any day to turn into a tyranny. And
Which I guess with the whole George Floyd thing, they should be celebrating. Like, yeah, that's another stick it to the man.
you would think that, the funny thing is, you would think that this movement, the protest right now would get a lot of support from a very libertarian leaning people because it is an uprising against government authority, explicitly, right? Against state power in the form of the violence of the enforcement arm of the police. You would think that as a libertarian, logically, you would say, "Fuck yeah, I can get down with that," but they would be the ones, pretty much, overwhelmingly supporting the cops against so it's not consistent.
No,
A lot of this shit is not consistent at all.
I think
And
that's what we realized through this podcast. Nothing is consistent.
because
Things flip flop.
what they're basing it on is literally nothing. It's just smoke, smoke and fucking
Yeah,
mirrors.
well, I think you're right. I think what the viewer is going to get from this is that what they think, what they value are just smoke and mirrors, and they need to figure out what the true values are,
Yeah,
which
and
is your class.
I guess we'll finish it off because you gotta go. But like, people don't even know what the fuck liberalism means anymore. Like, liberalism is what we're living under right now, and you can see this in Canada a lot because if you're conservative in Canada, the word liberals is very dirty to you, right? And it's vice versa for a liberal. Conservative is very dirty to you. They've lost all meaning of what the fuck this term even means, and what the Liberal Party, and all these people derive it from. Our entire world order, this capitalist world order, is, in political theory, it's liberalism. That's what it is, and it subscribes to basically a complete faith and reliance on free market capitalism, and that's it. There's nothing else. No, that's what it is. It's everything that we do in life and society is supposed to feed on this ever circulating system, that it needs to let capital circulate in this system, and the main engine is by profit. That is what liberalism means. 100% is just it's just based on it's like this individualism that is based on market production forces. So right now, Republican, Democrat, Liberal Party, Conservative Party, Tory Party in Britain, whatever, all of these parties are liberal democratic parties. If anybody would get anything from that, that is one thing that people should kind of be aware of, before these terms and labels get diluted to the point of meaninglessness.
Hmm. I feel like I learned a lot, like Jason would say.
Probably another episode one day, if we need to dive into that, we can dive into that. But that's basically, like I said before, Democratic and Republican Party basically representing one interest, right? They're basically one party putting on different colored shirts each day. Fucking Liberal Party of Canada, Conservative Party of Canada, basically the same party. The differences are very aesthetic. It's on the surface.
People are gonna be like, what about the Green Party and what about the NDP?
They're just a little bit more further straight, but at the base of it, they're all connected to this liberal, free market capitalism ideology that has been pervasive for the last couple hundred plus years of the advent rise of capitalism. That's what it is. People want them to be fucking different things. No, they're all the same shit, just the makeup is different. So you can vote all you want. You're just voting in the same party that does the same thing, but maybe just puts on a different shirt, puts on different makeup every day.
I think we're like treading in the realm of Infoverse or Infowars.
It won't be Infowars. This is not conspiracy. This is not like fucking chemtrails making frogs gay. Like this is political thought. This is political theory thought, and it's just people don't bother to really, like I said, the news, the media, the people, politicians, they just throw these terms at you now.
Well, I think what you're trying to say is people don't challenge their beliefs, right?
No,
this is what we've been talking about the whole time. Is
like they just throw out labels. Yeah, they throw out things and shit. They expect you not to know. I
feel like people feel more important when they feel like there's differences. Like you say, if you look at similarities between parties, there's probably more similarities than there are differences.
Yes,
and that's why we kind of group them as just one, because there's really not much. Not much does change when you
surface
vote for changes. Different parties. Yeah, the surface stuff changes. Like they're.
Do you want abortions or no abortions? Like what, surface stuff.
Well, and I'm not saying those surface things don't matter, but
it won't change society, basically.
There are like root causes in society that, like these racial issues, that aren't going to fix because of abortion rules.
That's precisely it. Even affirmative action and all these things, they're bandages. Even when they're trying to address racial issues, they're bandages. It doesn't do anything. It's just hand me out fucking bandages just to change what the surface looks like. You're putting on makeup to hide the fucking bruises and shit. Like
fucking bruises, this domestic abuse.
Yeah. So this was our political heavy two-man show.
Oh, I
Um,
feel like there's a lot of class and interest. I think a lot of people will have some value.
yeah, I'm
Maybe. I'm not
slowly
sure.
just converting everyone to fucking like socialism. Then, whoa, you know what we should end? Like, what if you're gonna put these labels on yourself? What would you label yourself?
Well, actually, that was one of the point I wanted to make was that
There's no
um,
labels.
a city mayor that I voted for, he said that he had no political view and that he just wanted to get things done.
Uh-huh.
And I kind of subscribe to that idea that whatever party can get the things that I want done, that's the one I would align myself. I guess I would flip flop depending on what issues that I would care about.
Yeah, that's
I would,
also
I don't know.
well, that's also a fucking. There's a political label for that as well.
Is that I don't
Yeah.
know? Is that political atheist or a
No, it'll
political
be like a pragmatic.
non-alliance?
It'll be like a pragmatic centralist or some shit like that.
Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah, fair enough. I'd be a pragmatic
Pretty much.
centrist.
Like
Yeah, I'll go
Obama
with that.
was the poster child of the modern day pragmatic centralist. That's
Okay,
what they're
I
about.
guess I guess I do like Obama. I do think so. Yeah,
Again,
I guess I'd be one.
again, these are all just labels that have been made. Like you know what I mean. So
Yeah, not
take it
nothing much
all
meaning.
as
Yeah,
meaningless stuff. It's just whether you want to wear a red shirt or a blue shirt or a green shirt
or a
any
mega
given
hat
day.
or
It's
whatever you
just a
like.
hat. There's fucking letters on it, and
Yeah,
people put
at the end of the day,
they
it's
put
just a
meaning
hat
into
that
it.
they sell. Yeah.
People put their own
What?
meanings into it.
How would you describe your? I know.
Oh, dude, I'll be fucking communist, man. I would be fucking. I would be so. I wouldn't even be show up on the spectrum in this country, and
Yeah.
like socialist, communist. Like I what really got me during my formative years was this was not just beliefs. I didn't believe. I was kind of like you. I was like I didn't really have too much of an opinion either way. I started forming the opinions after just studies of history and deeper dive into studying like political economy and stuff. And for me, it was a lot of what the what Marx said was like a foundation because it was attempting to put like a scientific tool to analyze like human history and how uh, the material relations affect everything, right? And it's
Hmm.
because you can't make experiments like you do in a scientific experiment. The scientific method you can never replicate it for human history and society. But what you can do is try to get as close to analogs for it and then analyze it that way, right? I like that because it's much more convincing than just do you believe in this or do you believe in that, right? It's just like with your
Yeah.
thesis, with this
It's more
analysis,
evidence based.
can you see how this would affect that, or how this would turn out like this, right? And then it's built upon practice, right? And then using these tools to analyze these things, and that's what got me into it. And then because there's big gaps in history. If you ever learn history, it's just names and places and dates. This guy did this. This guy did that. But then no one can tell you why. If you're just basing it on just fucking pure names and events, right? You won't be able to say why did Hitler lose against Russia, right?
Hmm.
You wouldn't be able to do it. But once you throw in the material analysis, the historical material analysis, then the shit is fucking. You can prove things. So, like the closest thing that you have to mathematical proofs. You'll get historical analysis proofs. You can
You're just
explain
you're talking
things.
about data. Yeah, you're
Not
using
just
data.
data for data's sake, but data using a proper analytical framework, right? To put the
Yeah,
data to use.
you're drawing conclusion from data.
Yeah, and Marxism is close to that, and then the big revolutionary movements, the Chinese revolutionary movements, the communist, like I see what it
Hmm.
did with the country, and then throughout like 5,000 years of just the majority of people just getting shit on, and then all the big good heroic stories are made about like rich aristocratic families and heroes and shit, and like what they can do, what they did with that stuff. It's very convincing to see
So
like their merits of what they did in history. Like most of these revolutionary movements, even the American Revolutionary moment in the beginning against England, right? It was based on real things. Like you could, and it's a very admirable movement. Same with all these revolutionary movements around the world, especially the ones that are based on like have a Marxist discipline to them.
So just a closing thought. What's your opinion of the saying, communist works in theory, not in practice?
It's
That's the thing I learned as a kid.
yeah, it's fucking bullshit. It's a Cold War rhetoric, and it's a rhetoric
Uh,
coming from the West. Like communism, first of all, it's never existed before. Communism is a goal, right? It's a goal of what the final stage of what economics would be like. Economics itself is the fucking it's the study of scarcity. It's how to deal with scarcity, right? This
mhm.
is what the theoretical endpoint that you should strive for because if you can achieve it, this is a humanitarian. If you're going to use it as an ideology, it's a humanitarian ideology at its very core. At the end, you're supposed to free people from
I think I think that's what
scarcity.
people misconcept is that
Yes,
it's
and
more of a humane
they're
like
basing yeah,
government. It's for
exactly.
the people, whereas
They're basing it
democracy or
yeah,
not democracy, but capitalism
yeah,
is less humane. It's treating people as cattle or
yeah, like
property
commoditized
or
everything.
commodity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What they're basing it on is Cold War stuff, and that's like ideology kind of plays um, not as big a part as it is as just a rival. Think of it as rival powers facing off
Yeah.
against each other,
I'm
right?
curious if people still learn that thing.
They don't
I mean,
like they can't reconcile the views. Like when America was the most threatened, they were pretty much as repressive as the Soviet Union was in its worst years. You had the
mm,
McCarthy fucking trials to root out communists. You executed people on suspected collaboration with the other side, the communism and stuff like that, right? With the other
mhm.
side, basically it's a wartime footing without the actual war. That's what the that's what most of the like the impressions you get nowadays are based on. It's two countries on a wartime footing with each other without going into a hot war. But
Mhm.
instead of viewing it that way, they view it as in it's like fucking ideology versus ideology, capitalism versus whatever, right? Like the Soviet Union had markets too. America's government built fucking the interstate. Like there's a lot of more when they tried to deal with each other, they did a lot of more things similar to each other than that was different. But what
Yeah.
won out in the end was the material conditions of each country, right? You had a lot
All right.
more
So, mhm.
like the Soviet Union throughout its entire history had was on the foot of trying to rebuild and catch up, right? And if you look at it from a Russian history perspective, they fucking transformed themselves like a lot. Like they went from fucking feudal backwater shit in the whole country to like a nuclear power that sent the first guy into space, right? Like like you got to view these things in historical context, and like that's why I subscribe to a very like a very uh socialist sort of view.
Mhm. All
Anyways,
right.
that was a long
I
one.
guess we'll. Indeed, indeed. I
Yes,
think.
please don't
Mhm.
anybody listening to me please, if you are an anti-communist, please don't come after me. I am a very low value target. Do not pull like a fucking Mussolini thing on me and try to come after me and purge me. I
No,
am no threat at all.
I don't think it's right that people kill you for your views.
Oh yeah, yeah. Historically, very socialist, communist people are been big targets. So please don't consider me as a target. I am a nobody on a no on a nothing podcast. All
Man,
right.
you gotta know the internet. By saying no, it's like basically asking for it.
Yeah, but it's our like our obscurity
Mhm.
works in our favor, so not many people will listen to this.
That's true. Yeah, yeah. Until we get famous, and then people go to our backlogs. It's like,
Yeah.
man, they had this lecture talk. All right,
I,
cool.
I I enjoy these rants. One of these days, I think I'll rant about even within like socialism and stuff. There's a whole bunch of different groups and people of socialism, and a lot of them you can get frustrated by some of what some people say, and some people have a really snotty attitude. One of these days, we'll probably get into all that stuff as
Well,
well.
there. I know. Destiny on Twitch. He calls himself a political streamer, and he talks about political debates and stuff. And he gets into some nasty debates with leftists and conservatives and stuff.
I would not.
And to the point where he's lost friends and business partners and things like that. It can get nasty, I should say.
Whatever, man. I fucking Twitch streamers, YouTube guys, and fucking even fucking podcasters and shit. We're all anybody that's saying this is full of hot air. Like this is called verbal laxative for a reason. We're just fucking ranting, anyways.
Yeah, it's a ranting meme. It's interesting. There's a lot of topics.
All of us are nobodies, basically. That's what I'm saying. No, all of us. We're all nobodies. If the world ended tomorrow, the universe wouldn't care. We're all nobodies. So fucking like anybody that thinks highly of themselves on this shit, whatever, man. This fucking just live life the way you do. Live and think the way you do, and hopefully just try to be conservative people and think in that way.
Yeah, just be kind of others and live life the way you want to live.
Yeah,
I subscribe to that.
All right, man. On that good note, a very rarity on our signing off stuff. Yeah, let's sign off.
All right, let's not.
Like, comment, subscribe. Thank you for our dear loyal listeners. All right, see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening.
See ya.
Bye.